Speaking of Valentine's Day, we should talk about a topic that is just so romantic.
What?
Codependency.
Oh, that's my middle name. Codependent. No, I'm kidding. I feel like I've come such a long way.
I feel like you have to.
I feel like you are the opposite. I feel like you are independent.
You think I'm independent?
I do.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like Michael would disagree. We're
in different ways.
Independent in a weird way. Like
codependent. I feel like you're independent.
I don't think I'm codependent.
No, exactly. So you're independent.
Okay.
But you're not independent like in the sense where like you could use a personal assistant.
Yes. That I could use someone to like schedule my life for me, but I could like do things on my own.
Right. Which I feel like up until recently I could not. Which is so bizarre because I'm an only child. And you would think that I'm good at being alone, but I'm almost not. It makes no sense.
You're like interesting though because...
Oh, thanks.
Well, no, like there's so many times when I feel like you are good at being alone or like you want to be alone.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like ever since I've known you, I've never felt like you were super, like you and I spent a lot of time together, but I've never felt like you were someone, because I always think of myself where I always need to be surrounded by people. Like I need to be with people 24/7 and you're not so much like that.
So I'm introverted maybe?
No, I think that, I think that you have like, you'll have like your person. And if you're not with that person, you'd like, it's almost like you'd rather be alone. Yeah. Or something.
Yeah, but I would prefer to not be alone.
But it used to be like almost in an unhealthy way where you were like, I'm just going to wait for them to come home. Yeah. But now I feel like you're a lot more like, no, I'm just going to live my life and try to enjoy it, which I think is obviously so good.
Yeah. I think in my past relationships, I was very much the type to spiral if I, and this, it's hard to compare apples and oranges because completely different times of my life. But like, I feel like everyone in high school, maybe not college, maybe some people grew up in college. I certainly did not. Like if you knew me in college, you don't know me now. But like in college, for instance, like you have a boyfriend, or at least for me, like I prefer to do everything with my significant other. Like I don't really need friends. It was such an unhealthy mindset to have, but it was more so like I was codependent and I wanted to spend every waking moment with that person, that if they ever left me, I would throw a tantrum. Oh. And when I say throw a tantrum, and it's like you hear those stories of like people who are in relationships where like they get torn apart from like their family and friends. Not saying I did that with family, but it was like at the end of our relationship, I feel like we both didn't really have friends because we were all each other had, because we were so codependent.
Right. Like it was like that was kind of it.
Yes.
But I also feel like so bad. It wasn't until you started, like we started getting close and like you started to like build your own life that you realized you didn't need like that person.
Right. And I think what I've learned in my time with Mystery Man is that I feel like looking back, I didn't realize how insecure and how low self-esteem I had at the time. But I really do think being codependent and having low self-esteem go hand in hand, because now that I have some confidence, now that I have some self-esteem, not saying I'm where I'd like to be, but I definitely am not on the ground anymore. I think now it's easier for me to be independent, because it's like once you learn to, value yourself, you stop needing anyone else, because you don't need someone to make you feel valuable.
Right. Exactly. I think that's such a good point.
And for instance, 2 weekends ago, I don't know where you were. Maybe you were already in Turkey at the time. You were?
Yeah.
Not that you're my only friend, but like I didn't make plans when you were in Turkey and the boys went skiing. So your boyfriend, my boyfriend, they went skiing. You were gone. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do this weekend? And I didn't do anything. I didn't make any plans. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like do my own thing this weekend. I'm going to go to the Equinox. I went to Sephora after. I went to Trader Joe's. I came home, made myself dinner. And I did nothing but just like relax and have a low-key evening, day, whole weekend by myself. And I was like, if this was 2-3 years ago, I would be unproductive, hyperventilating in a ball, taking weed edibles to make myself fall asleep so that I could just wake up and have Mr. Man be home.
Right.
And now I'm like, well, no, like I don't need him to keep myself busy anymore. Like I can just be busy on my own and make the time go by, keep myself distracted. And I don't even need other people to do that anymore.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's another sign of like codependency too, is like if you're trying to like fill the time so much with other people.
Right.
That's like, I think that's more so like what I could notice about myself. Not that I think I'm codependent, but if I ever was in past relationships, like I definitely don't think I'm like that at all anymore. But when I was younger, I think, like you said about like the curling up in a ball and like waiting for the person to come back, I think the way I would have probably coped more with like the more unhealthy relationships I've had in the past is like, if that person was gone, okay, I'm gonna be with my, you know, best friend on Saturday for 5 hours, and then as soon as I'm not with her anymore, I'm gonna go hang out with someone else, be with them for 7 hours, sleep at someone's house that night. Like I am not going to be home by myself alone, because I think I was so terrified of, like, of my own thoughts that I'm like, I don't want to be alone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like feel like I feel like when I was younger, I like there'd be a part of my brain that would tell me like, oh, you're alone, like no one's here, you're by yourself, no one cares, like, which isn't true. Like being alone is a good thing sometimes, but I would almost just like fill the time with just being with people so I didn't have to like be alone with my own thoughts, which I feel like also isn't healthy either. Right. And that's something I've worked on, where like I still love to be with people, but there's also times that I'm like, hey, it's okay to like sit here and be alone with your own thoughts and like process them, because when you're constantly surrounded by like, you're working during the week, you're with your significant other, like you're cooking dinner together, you're sleeping, you're waking up, you're going to the gym, like you're not spending any of that time actually processing like your own emotions, your own thoughts, which I think is important.
Right.
So no, I think that's really, really important. I think that's like obviously growth.
It is growth. If you're in a relationship and you can't spend time apart from each other and spend time alone, like you said, I think there's something deeper going on. I don't think it necessarily means that your partner isn't the one, but I think people adopt these unhealthy habits and they don't even realize that they're in it until they're like, oh shit, like what am I going to do this weekend? Like my partner is going away, and like, I just remember like being in an unhealthy relationship, being codependent, and making it so difficult on my boyfriend at the time that it was like easier for him to just not do anything other than hang out with me, because
which that's not good either.
No. And it's so wild to think that that was me back in the day. And now looking at how I am today, like obviously would I prefer, like we joke like, oh yeah, I want to be in Mr. Man's back pocket. Like, like yeah,
that's a good one.
There's some truth to that. But at the same time, I know that like I can be on my own and be fine.
Yeah. I also think it's like someone said, like there's always that whole thing that it's like, how can you expect anyone to love you if you don't love yourself? And I saw a quote recently that was like, that's such a lie. Like even if you don't love yourself, it's okay for other people to love you, right? Like I think I've gone through periods in my life where I didn't love myself, or I was down on myself, or I felt insecure or anxious, and like thank God that I had people that still loved me despite me thinking that way of myself, because like, you know, having the love of other people helped me get through those periods of my life and helped me, you know, learn to cope with myself and love myself again. So I think that's such a lie that's like, oh, you can't, like no one's gonna love you if you don't love yourself first. Like, yeah, no, like lie. people should love you no matter what, and they should help you get through that, because sometimes like loving yourself is complicated. So I think that, however, I think that like your ability to give love is going to be difficult if you don't love yourself. Like, yeah. I think that is like the larger thing. Like, I think people are going to love you no matter what. People should love you no matter what. But as a partner, like when you think about the other person, if you are, you know, codependent, or like, you know, you're feeling insecure and you have that like lowered self-esteem, and you know, it develops into like an unhealthy attachment style or an unhealthy relationship, like you're probably not gonna be able to love your partner the way that they, I don't want to say deserve to be loved, but like the way that you theoretically probably would want to love them, right? Because love is about, you know, trust and, you know, being who you are, and, you know, you're not supposed to complete each other. You're supposed to be two wholes that like complement each other. Like you don't want to complete someone else. Someone shouldn't complete you. Like you should be your own person, and you should love the person that you're with for who they are. And I feel like if you're making someone more than that, then like you're not like loving them properly. Right. So I think that sometimes like what I've tried to remind myself is it's honestly less about me, and it's about Michael. It's about the person I'm with. And it's like, if I don't have a healthy relationship with myself, or don't have like my own like shit in check, it almost like makes me feel like I'm not as great of a partner. And I feel like that's like a motivating reason to like get right kind of with yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think if you can't show up for yourself, how are you going to show up in the relationship?
Exactly.
But to your point, I do think it's unfair. Like when people say like, oh, you have to give, whether you want to say 50-50 or 100% of the time, like, no, like there are going to be days when like you can only give 20% and your partner is going to have to give 80% to make up for that. And like, that's just how like some things go. Like if your partner's stressed with work, like they may not be able to give it their all for like a short period of time when they're stressed. And so being able to be with someone that can recognize like, oh, I might have to pick up the slack this week, and be there emotionally or physically a little bit more, that's huge.
Yeah. I actually think that as we get older, that is like such a crucial part that I didn't realize when you're like in high school or college. You don't really think about that stuff because everyone's just like sleeps all day and like watches Netflix in college and like you go to parties and like whatever. But like as you become an adult, you realize that you go through so many like ebbs and flows like in your life. And Michael and I always joke about it. We're like, who's the better one in the relationship like this month? Because there's things like major life. I mean, him and I have been together for obviously so many years. We've encountered so much life, but like he's gone through traumatic things. I've gone through traumatic things. Like we've gone through different like eras in our lives where like I wasn't the best version of myself. He wasn't the best version of himself. And usually like when I'm going through it, like he kind of needs to pick it up and be like the better partner, and vice versa. There's times when he's been going through it where I need to pick it up and be like the stronger partner. And I feel like that's not talked about enough. Yeah. But it's so important, because if one person is always like going through it, like the other person doesn't feel like they have that support when they need it, like that's not great either. So I think that's super important.
Yes.